Really?
So good to be here. This is my first, I'm going to say it out loud, it's my first in-person event in over 2 years. Feels good to be out, people. Feels good to be out.
Absolutely, and welcome. And I'm happy that the first event is here with us.
I know. How good is that?
Yeah. Sarah, let's start from the beginning. Just your background. You grew up in the UK.
I did.
Tell us about that. What was it like you growing up, and then also how you got to being a missionary? We're starting that far back.
Yeah, we're going a very long way back here. So Sandras is right. I'm British. I grew up in the UK, but Africa was calling my name from early days. And I first came to Africa when I was 21 and fell in love with the continent over 20 years ago.
Yes. You went to Zimbabwe.
And I went to Zimbabwe.
Tell us about the.
So Zimbabwe still holds a massive hole in my heart. It captured my heart 20 years ago and made me fall in love with the continent. And I'm back here today because of that time in Zimbabwe. And actually, Zimbabwe inspired the business I built, the life I now have. I mean, so Africa has a lot to answer for, let's just put it that way. And so at 21 years old, much to my parents' horror at the idea of going to deepest, darkest Africa, I set off with this crazy notion that I could somehow change the world. As a naive, idealistic 21-year-old, thinking that Africa needed me to save it, when actually it probably saved me, is probably the reality. Came to Africa as a 21-year-old, went to work for an aid organisation, and spent the first 8 years of my working life working for NGOs, trying to save the world. And quickly realised there's no saving the world through working through an NGO. There's just a lot of pain and heartache. But that was my introduction to working life and my introduction to Africa.
Brilliant. So I remember we were having conversations around when you go to a different place and you're struggling with the food. Like, I went to Silicon Valley. We went to Silicon Valley, and then we were this place where we had to eat vegetables the whole time.
Avocado
then it was miserable. And then you had to eat pap.
I had to eat pap. Yes. But my first week in Africa, I arrived, and it was rainy season in Zimbabwe at the time because it was January, and I went to work with a local organisation, and I was one of maybe 2 or 3 white people out of several hundred other colleagues, and one of only 2 foreigners. And we were there for our induction week camp for the whole week. And I was led to my accommodation the first day I arrived, and it's raining and it's a bit muddy, and I'm thinking Africa's hot and sunny all the time, which was obviously a bit of the first shock. The second shock was, here's your mud hut for the week, with my mattress on the floor, and I'm thinking snakes, spiders, scorpions, big bugs. This is not going to be good. And my third shock was pup for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 7 days, with no fork. Eventually, someone took pity on me after there was a lot of tears and some starvation happening, and produced a fork. But it was definitely a long way out of my comfort zone, and that first week was definitely a shock.
It's quite interesting. Like when you leave home, right? We all just believe our food is the best food. Like,
absolutely.
When I come here, I'm looking for pap all the time. Like, where do I find it in Cape Town? And I drive to Woodstock and find it. The best food, and I can do pap for breakfast, lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm okay.
Of course. Right.
And then when I'm in the UK, I'm like, gravy and mash again.
Yes, roast potatoes again.
Now, tell us about your travels, like how you met Jake and how you started.
Yes. Well, as I said, after 8 years, I spent several years in Zimbabwe, and then Mugabe decided that white people needed to leave. So I ended up having to leave rather abruptly, which was distressing, as has been for many Zimbabweans over the last 20 years. But I ended up taking another job and moved to the Far East to work for another aid agency, and spent a lot of time in China, and met my husband in the Far East, and my husband's from Montana. So we often joke that we both moved halfway around the world to meet each other, which was amazing because he comes from the tiniest blip of a town in Montana. Montana is a state in the far west corner of the US, about the size of France. It was huge, with less than 1 million people in that whole space. So there's very few Montanans in the world, and I happened to meet one of them and marry one. But he grew up on a farm and ranch, and so was used to big, wide open spaces. And when I met him and we returned to his home, I realized, gosh, Montana, there's a lot of similarities between Montana and Africa, and there's incredible wildlife, big, wide open spaces, lots of bush. And we just had this crazy idea that maybe the safari experience that works so beautifully and amazingly in Africa that I fell in love with while I was here could maybe work in a place like Montana, which was the beginning of a crazy idea of going into business.
Yeah. How many of you have watched The Revenant? The Revenant, yeah, with Leo DiCaprio.
There's a lot of death in that movie.
That was
being eaten by a bear.
Yes, that was Montana.
That's Montana.
Bozeman.
Yes.
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. Yes, home is right in Yellowstone.
Brilliant. And yeah, tell us now, continue with that story. So it's an interesting start, like how you now started and how at some point you're struggling to like your own food stamps and something which a lot of people wouldn't believe. Like, what? The $100 million woman?
Also lived in a camper and lived off food stamps. Yes, she did. But if I go back one step further, which was, I finished my career unwillingly, yes, but I finished my career as working with aid organisations, and still was frustrated by the sense of I feel like there's something, like many entrepreneurs often have, we have this sense of I want to drive some change, I want to change something, I want to make the world a better place, I want to do something that feels as meaningful, impactful, I can connect with my own being with what I'm trying to do, and that was, like many of you, what was inside of me, and frustrated at not being able to drive enough change, and feeling like this vehicle that I'm working within is not the right shape for trying to drive and solve problems, because aid agencies are trying to attend to problems in a different way, but they generally don't solve them, right? They generally are just trying to keep people alive, bandage people, prop people up, and be there in crisis situations. And we realised that maybe we had the right idea but the wrong vehicle, and actually that the vehicle, a better vehicle, is maybe business, because the very idea of a business is that you're solving a problem with a sustainable solution, because you're supposed to make money solving the problem, and therefore it's sustainable. And so we had this sort of epiphany, which was, well, if we want to save the world, which obviously is a very generic big statement, maybe we should learn something about business, because actually maybe we could pour our energies and talents and ideas into solving problems through using business. So we arrived in Montana with virtually nothing to our names, as we'd been working in aid agencies for a long time, both of us, which meant both of us were poverty-stricken. But with this idea of can we start something and create a business and try and drive change. So that was the beginning of could we start a business? And the idea that we had was maybe the safari concept that works so well in Africa could work really well in the US, and maybe we could create new ways of doing sustainable development and ecologically friendly hotels and experiential travel and. But at the beginning of the idea was, could we recreate the safari experience in the American market, and could we create access and preserve wild places without having to destroy them and do lots of big crazy development. So that was the beginning of the idea.
And I like that in terms of, also I've got a problem with a lot of organizations, like aid organizations or NGOs, where the name in itself is a conflict with what they're trying to achieve. Like if you say, we're action against this, against poverty, but if poverty goes away, then you don't exist anymore, right? Almost like you don't want the problem to go away because you need it to continue doing what you're doing, as opposed to if it's like wealth, then we can continue to do that. And so, but anyway, now coming back to your journey, tell us about those beginning days. And there was a time when you built, you had your camp, and then there was a storm.
Yes. So those beginning days, I said, often when I'm chatting with entrepreneurs now today, it's very easy to think, oh, you're white, you're from the West, you had money, it was easy to make this happen. And I was like, well, I didn't have any money. I had a negative amount in my bank account. Certainly living in a Western nation, but had no experience in business, no access to networks. I didn't know any other entrepreneurs, had no idea how entrepreneurialism really even worked. Just had a vague idea that maybe we could try and use business as a vehicle for doing some good, and that's really all we had. And our own tenacity with, can we make something happen? And I guess the one serious piece of privilege that we had that often is not available here is I had credit cards. So, which obviously are not quite so easily accessible here. But I racked up a lot of credit card debt, which was terrifying all at the same time, because I was constantly moving balances around from one card to another, to try and pay for things.
Financial management,
that's what that was, yes. But we had no angels, we had no home. We had a rundown camper that we were living in, which is a caravan here, and we had one small child a 6-month-old baby when we started, and my husband saying to me, and I'm a mother, and he's child's father, but him saying, we can't afford to take on any employees, so it's us. I'm like, well, I also have a baby. And he's like, well, I'll just throw him on the back, it'll all be fine. And but that's what we did. So we started in less than optimal circumstances, that's for sure, with a crazy idea, a few credit cards, and an idea actually that did not work at the beginning. So from starting a business to exiting a business, there was a whole lot of failure and a whole lot of loss in the middle, at the beginning.
Tell us about some of the lessons and pivots and some of the things that were changing the game for you. Okay, we figured this out, and then it moves the needle.
Yeah.
Tell us about those moments.
Yeah, I think the when you have an idea, the challenging part about having a good idea is it can be a great idea, but nobody else wants it. And we had a great idea and a great product, because who doesn't want to sleep in beautiful tents with incredible scenery, right? Everybody, right? Well, it turns out everybody doesn't want to do that in the middle of Montana where nobody is already going. So what we realized was actually the product itself was a good idea, in that people would come on our website, they would phone us up, but they instead of saying, when can I book to come and stay with you, they would say, where can I get your tent? I was like, what do you mean, where can you get my tent? You can have my tent if you come and stay in it. And I'm like, well, no, I don't need to go there, but I really like the idea and I like the tent, and I would like a tent. I was like, Okay, so we realised that we had something, we had an idea that people liked the idea of sleeping in a beautiful tent. They didn't want the tent where I had put it. And so we quickly had to grapple with the idea that when we call this product market fit, right, this is the business language around this, we didn't have product market fit. We just had an idea that we liked and that people liked the idea of, they just didn't like the product that we'd put together. So that's really hard, because remember, you've maxed yourself out on credit cards to make this happen, and now nobody wants it. That's quite painful. But what we, the key there, and what we did, and what many of you are having to learn to do also, is adjust and pivot and recognise, okay, they don't want my tent in a field in Montana, but they do want my tent. So maybe I could take my tents to them, and I could take the tents to them for a wedding or a family reunion or a party, and we could set up event tents for people to sleep in at an event. So it's like, okay, pivot number one. So we metamorphed ourselves into an event company that now had the same beautiful tents with beautiful beds in them and lovely linens and still a lot of credit card debt. And we started saying, we'll bring our tents to you. We'll bring your tents to your wedding, and we'll do amazing events. And people started phoning and started saying, great, I want you in New York on this date. I'm like, whew, okay, New York, right, great, that's a long way. But we said yes. Anytime anyone asked us to do something, was prepared to pay us money, we said yes. I was pregnant with our second child, actually, when we got a call to put 150 tents up in New York. And the event was the same week I was due to give birth to our second child. At which point we looked at each other, and this was the biggest contract anyone had ever offered to pay us money for, like, anything. And we didn't have 150 tents, we had 4 tents. And the event is the week my child's due. And I looked at my husband, and this was a contract for $250,000.
Wow.
And I was like, that was more money than I'd ever seen in my entire life. I mean, it was like mind-blowing amounts of money. I looked at my husband and I said, well, you've been at one birth, right? I'll handle the birth, you go handle the tents. So that's what happened. He went off we found a way to manufacture 146 tents and furnish them and take them to this event in New York. And I stayed home and had a baby.
Wow. Wow.
But it was amazing, because that one event was cataclysmic for us, really, in great ways, because we didn't make any money from the event, but we now paid off our credit card debt and paid off acquiring 150 tents. So we've now got product. So we've got a product that someone else paid for by doing one event, because we'd been brave enough to say yes when we had to figure out how on earth we were going to possibly pull that off and have a baby at the same time. But just had to think, this is too big of an opportunity to say no to. Can we figure out a way to make it happen? Can we call in every favour from everybody that we know to help us pull this off and try and pull it off? Because if we could pull it off, it'll move us forward. It won't solve all our problems, but it'll move us forward. And
you invited friends, like you had to call friends and come and help
call friends.
us.
My husband called everyone he knew. He called friends even that I had in England and said, could you come and help us put up 150 tents in 4 days? And some crazy friends of ours said, yeah, that sounds fun. And flew over. I said, we'll buy you a flight. We can't pay you anything, but we could just buy you a flight. Come and help put up tents. Crazy as they were, they came and helped us and put up tents.
Fantastic. Now, if we fast forward to the time now you're trying to fundraise,
yeah.
What were the frustrations? What are the lessons? And how did you get it to the end point?
Well, if I take you to my second pivot.
Oh yes. Okay. Let's do the second pivot.
Second pivot, because business number 2 is not really scaling. Not it's really reliant on someone seeing your website, calling you, and saying, "I need tents in this place." So we started to make some money from our event business, but it was very difficult to think about scaling it, and that's really the key for thinking about raising money, right? We had a great business. I had one great contract for 250,000. I was getting more contracts for 10,000 here and 5,000 here, and we had income coming in. But when an investor looks at that, they go, "It's not really very scalable. How are you going to scale that business? How are you going to do 100 times more than you're doing with that today?" And there was no real way for our event business to scale it. And we had it in our minds that we were trying to build something much bigger than us. We didn't really want a lifestyle business, and lifestyle businesses are amazing, and they're fun, and they're great. They're just not the kind of businesses that get funded, right? We had in our minds, we were trying to build a business we were trying to scale because we wanted to save the world. We wanted to use our business as a vehicle for doing good, driving change, making an impact. So that means it has to be big. It has to have some kind of significance to it in some way. So we realised the event business it's not going to cut it. It's not going to do it. And so we made our second pivot.
Siri, we're not talking to you.
Oh, Siri, do you want to come to my party? She's always get that.
You can close it. We don't need it.
Poor Siri is getting shut off. Second pivot, we realised, okay, this business model, I still don't have product market fit for what I'm really trying to achieve. So I have to think about letting go of a business that's finally making some money. Now, how crazy is that, right? So you finally got a business that's actually making some money. Your credit card debt is now paid off, and you've been living on food stamps with your children in a trailer, which in no one's world is great. And you're saying to yourself, I think this business doesn't work, which is nutty, right? Really nutty. We knew we just couldn't build a scalable, sustainable, investable business with the model that we had. So we made our final pivot, which at the time I didn't know was going to be the final pivot, but we pivoted to creating tented resorts outside of national parks. So we took the tents that we had and we put them in a place where we knew the people wanted to go. So unlike my first adventure into this space, we realised nobody wants to come here, but they do want to go here. So could we create like a tented experience, hotel experience with our tents, which was effectively the beginning of the company that I started, built, sold, and put investors for and sold. And so that challenge of letting go of something that was working but wasn't scalable is my first piece of advice about getting investment, because you can have something that's good but it's not great, and it can be good for lots and lots of reasons and can be creating income, can be paying people's wages, can be doing something great, and we realised that we can't put all our energy into that because it's not replicable, it's not scalable, we can't grow it. And that piece of our event business still exists today, but it's still a really tiny piece of business in comparison with the overall business that we built. So that, to sort of take us back to your question, Sandras, that was the first sort of aha moment really with thinking about scale and thinking about growing something and building something of significance, was that you've got to be able to think about, is this something that could be big? How would I scale it? If I had all the money in the world and money was no object for making something happen, how is there a big enough opportunity with this? Is it scalable? Could it be something more than this? And how. I mean, the interesting thing was, because you think, well, you could do a lot of money with events, you could have them in every city, and you could, but what was the market share? Another bit of terminology, right? What's the market? What's the market size of this opportunity? Do you understand it? And not only do you understand it, but is there a strategy for acquiring market share? Now that's a really interesting gap that I see a lot, because we can say, oh, the market's really huge. The market's worth $1 billion, and have absolutely no strategy for how I'm going to capture any of it whatsoever. And that's my second piece of advice about being investable, which is having a clear understanding of, this is my market, the market needs to be big. Usually the market needs to be worth at least $1 billion. And you have to have a plan, and that's all a strategy is, right? It's just a plan of how you are going to take a piece of that market. What does it look like? What does your business model look like with thinking about scale? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And maybe could you also explain the difference between a lifestyle business and an investable, scalable business? So a lot of people do have that. They come to, like, can you invest with me? But they have a lifestyle business, but they don't know that they do.
I'll give you a really good example of that with my own business example, for example. So we created Under Canvas, which version 3 became tented hotels outside a national park, right? That's it in one nutshell. And a lifestyle business could have been a small boutique tented hotel outside of one national park. That could be a lifestyle business, that I live there on my property. I have people who come and stay during the summer. We look after our guests. They leave. I pack up for
and
the
then
winter.
on the reviews, they say Sarah was really
Sarah
nice.
was amazing, and her
Next time
children
when you
are
go there,
really beautiful.
Well, that's
and
for Sarah
the
again.
dog is exactly. So a lifestyle business is a business that revolves around you, and you can have employees, you can have a manager even with a lifestyle business, but it's a business that revolves around you and your life and the life you are trying to create for you. And as I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with lifestyle businesses. They're fantastic. They just they don't scale them, right? So that was the difference. I could have had a very nice lifestyle business, but we realized and thought, actually we have an idea that we could have not just one location outside of a national park. We could be in every national park in the US and beyond, and that there's plenty. We could do 30 or 40 of these, and this is something that could scale. And my strategy for capturing market share was replicating this model in this place, in this place, this place, this place, this place, and this place, and having unit economics of what that would take, how much money that would cost to do it, and what the potential return might be on doing that.
Absolutely. So I like that. And then one book that explains that also very well, talks about the founder's dilemma, says, do you want to be king or do you want to be rich? Okay, although a lot of people want to be rich kings, but
yes, I'd say both. Both sounds good, right?
But a lot of times it's either you're the king, meaning you make all the decisions, and sometimes like, you know what, it's raining today, I'm not opening. Like, yeah, it's your business. I'm going on holiday, we're closed. Whereas now, if you want to be rich, meaning you start taking other people's capital, and then you start having systems in place, and almost like it at the beginning, it almost feels like you're losing a little bit of that freedom, because now you are answerable to other people, and you need to have things that work in a predictable fashion. Yeah. And sometimes entrepreneurs struggle with that, to say
predictable fashion. Oh yeah, that's yeah. I mean that's a really good phrase, because our business in the early stage was complete chaos. There was no predictable fashion, but we realized if we were going to build anything of any substance, we had to build in systems and procedures and operating processes to be able to scale it, because then you've got an idea of this is what I'm trying to replicate, this is what I'm trying to do more of, this is how I'm going to do it. It doesn't all revolve, and I'm not trying to do it by adding 15,000 people. I'm trying to use a small lean team to be able to do more and scale effectively.
Fantastic. And could you now tell us, like, what are the other things that would get somebody funded?
Okay.
Yes.
So we talked about having a big enough market share. We've talked about having a strategy, a plan of action of how you're going to capture market share. When we spent quite a long time actually before we went out for funding, really getting what I call traction, and that is proving that your business is selling products or services at a price point that somebody else wants. Now, I know that sounds really obvious, but it's actually really not, because can you prove, what evidence have you got, or what proof have you got that enough people want what you're selling at the price that you're selling at? And so that's what we call traction. And when we launched our first site in Yellowstone National Park, we went another 5 years before we had any institutional money come to our table, which meant a whole lot more credit cards and a little bit of bank debt. But traction, proving this was a thing, proving that people wanted to come and stay in a hotel and in a tented hotel, would come and spend a lot of money with me to stay in a tent in a field, was actually gaining proof points for investors to say, this is a thing. And that's what traction is really. It's demonstrating to people like me now that you have a thing, that what you've got is a thing, and that people will pay you for your thing. And actually you're going to be a really big thing. And here's the proof points that I've got of why I think that is realistic. Now, it's really easy to think, if I just show investors that if I give them my forward projections and I say, if you invest $10,000 today, I'm going to acquire 100,000 customers over the next 5 years and we're all going to be happy. If you don't have any traction to back that up, no one's going to believe you. So it's like, traction is like the evidence that you've got something and that you've got what it takes to grow and scale. Because that's the other thing is, how are you demonstrating, you as a person, are you demonstrating that you've got what it takes to grow and drive value and create revenue? And generally, revenue creation doesn't happen all by itself. It would be so nice if it did, right? You just build a website and it just makes you money.
Digital marketing.
Digital. If only that were true.
Marketer. Then all my problems would be gone.
My son, who is now 8, used to say when he was in preschool, when asked the question, what does mummy do? He used to say, oh, mummy sits at the pewter, called the computer, a pewter. Mummy sits at the pewter and makes money. And I was like, oh, if only that were true. That would be so good. All I have to do is just sit at the computer and it will make money. But can you prove that you can do it, that you can drive revenue, and that people want what you've got, and that you've demonstrated that it works here, and maybe it works here, and maybe it works here too, and that actually we could do 10 times more than we're doing right now if we just had some capital. So how do you demonstrate, and yes, it's chicken and egg, because you think, well, it takes money to make that happen. You have to find a way to get enough traction to get someone to believe you, because nobody, I will not tell you a lie, nobody wants to give you a money for you to just test out your idea. Nobody. You must use your money, your credit cards, your friends and family, your network to test out your ideas, right? And like me, you were going to make a lot of mistakes. You were going to spend money on things that don't work. You were going to spend money on things that are not scalable. You were going to try and prove many things. But you need to realize this is a game of using your money and people who love you and care for you. And you can say, well, we're in Africa, I don't have... Of course, nobody has it. That's the point. But part of this journey is figuring out, can I have enough tenacity? Can I have enough guts? Can I have enough ability to risk everything I've got to try and make this work? Because if you can't do that, why should someone else do it for you? And that's the really hard part about entrepreneurship, I think. It requires us putting our big girl and boy pants on and saying, I'm actually a really good bet, and I'm going to bet on myself, and do whatever it takes to risk my own self, my own family, my own money, my own network, before going out for someone else's institutional money.
Absolutely. So with traction, for me, it's like when entrepreneurs come to me, I've got this great idea, and if somebody just give me some money, and I'll make a lot. This woman was speaking, and the lady was pitching to me, said, and how much are you looking for? It says 10 million rand. Okay, yeah, but if only they give me, I'll make $1 billion. Like, oh, wow. How much have you done? No. I just need the money first. Wow. From 0 to 10, and you do that.
Not coming
but exactly.
You've proven it.
Which is like, you say that if you ask somebody, say, look, I can build your house for you, 2-story. Like, have you ever built a house? No, but I'm passionate about houses. If only somebody believed, I'll build your house. Like, with zero traction. You say, would you say, yeah, build my house? So that's, I think, a similar example. We're going to take questions from the audience.
I was going to maybe just follow on and say one last thing, which is connected with that, in the sense of so much about what I've said is connected with tenacity, right? And so much what influences an investor into whether they will give you money is not just what you've done in the business, which is critically important, but it's also about you as a person, in terms of what are you capable of? What have you risked? What are you willing to do? Because this journey is so hard. It is, I'm not going to lie to you, it was 12 years, that's why I'm very grey and I'm only 45. It is stressful, it is exhausting, it is unending. There is problem after problem after problem after problem, and it all relies on you to solve it. And so what makes someone investable, their business investable, is have you got what it takes? We are constantly looking for people who are not going to quit when something comes down the fan. Because a lot is going to come down the fan. It's like, how are you going to handle that? How are you going to find solutions? Are you a problem solver or a problem blamer? Is it someone else's fault, or are you going to own it? What's in you to be able to, pull this off? Because ultimately, the greatest secret of all, I think, is anybody, I believe, can turn anything into $1 billion opportunity. The idea is not really the thing. It's whether you've got what it takes to build the thing or not. Anything can be a thing. Some crazy things have become things, right? Really, really crazy things. You'd think that should never be a thing.
Fidget spinners.
There's ridiculous stuff like that shouldn't be a thing, that was a thing, and you sold millions of dollars worth of it. But it's like, are you the person it requires to build something extraordinary? Have you got what it takes to build something extraordinary? And that's really, the essence of what investors are really looking for. We're trying to figure out, can they go the distance?
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Big hand for Sarah, please. Your final 1 minute, your words of inspiration to entrepreneurs, to everybody here. And the people joining us via Facebook.
Dream a dream. Dream a dream to make the world a better place. Because if you can dream it, as Kevin Costner once told us in a movie, if you can dream it, you can build it, right? But part of the trouble is dreaming it in the first place. dream a dream that you care about, that matters to you, that is worth giving your life to, your energy, your passions, your time, your money, your 10 years of your life, 20 years of your life, whatever. Care about something. If you care about something, we can build a better world for everyone to live in. And I was telling my taxi driver on the way over here this evening that entrepreneurs are the builders of the future. Everything we touch, eat, taste, smell, sit on, wear, drive, etc. has been created by an entrepreneur, right? If you've spent money on it, it took time to do. Somebody created it for you. And so entrepreneurs are the builder of our world. And what you build in the future matters, right? Because it will create the world that we all live in. And so if you can dream it, dream of building a better world for all of us.
Thank you very much, everybody.